Hello and welcome to episode 152 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. This week, I use AI to enhance an audio clip for the show. Or maybe the computers have killed me and what you're hearing now is AI. Stay tuned to find out.
The Biden administration has announced new standards for federally funded EV chargers. Chargers receiving a government subsidy must be working at least 97% of the time. Now, if only Congress worked 97% of the time, they'd really have something. Also, I'm Canadian. I've never understood the difference between Congress and the Senate. Maybe Senate is a better punchline. I don't know.
Which can boil water faster, gas stoves or induction cooktops? The answer will surprise you if you're stupid. But since you listen to our show, be prepared not to be surprised.
The European Union is one step closer to banning the sale of new fossil fuel vehicles by 2035. They saw that New Jersey had already done the same thing, and they couldn't handle the embarrassment of being outclassed by New Jersey.
All that and more, including the safety of e-bike batteries, are called into question, and a new survey by our local utility gives insight into how EV owners charge. All that coming up on this week's Clean Energy Show.
I want to talk about my gas bill off the top. And an update on my electrify everything in my home where I'm trying to get rid of my furnace.
Right.
But first, I want to talk about a couple of news stories related to gas prices. So the Los Angeles Times has a piece here from a few days ago. People's gas bills for January started coming out in early February in California. And a lot of people were shocked. There was one guy here noted in the article in Long Beach, his gas bill for January, $907. 8 times higher than his bill was at this time last year. So lots of people getting shocked by their natural gas bills in California for January because the prices have gone up. And then another article here from the Victoria Times columnist, ballet rehearses in car factory as the energy crunch hits Hungary. So this is a story from Hungary. There's a ballet company that is, they couldn't afford the heat for their rehearsal space because, the gas prices, the energy prices have spiked so much in Europe. So Audi has a car factory in Hungary in the same town. And so they've now loaned factory space to these ballet dancers to do their rehearsals because they're basically kicked out of their studio because they can't afford the heat. Crazy.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Putin. Boy, he's screwing with everything we deal with here on the show.
Yes, but as we've mentioned, Europe has made huge progress to getting off Russian gas. Of course, prices have gone up, but things are moving in the right direction, and hopefully prices come down. But anyway, I just got my own gas bill a few days ago, and I'm on equalized payments, which a lot of us around here are. They figure out your gas usage for the year, and they approximate what that would be in monthly installments. So you pay the same every month. Otherwise, you'd have a huge spike of your energy bill in January when we use a lot of natural gas to heat our homes. So anyway, when I bought this house in 2006, it had actually 2 furnaces in it. And I think they were original to 1962. I think they were the 1962 furnaces. There was one for the main floor and one for the basement, 2 furnaces, which gives you an idea of how cold it gets around here. A year or 2 into owning the house, we replaced that with a high efficiency gas furnace, just 1 furnace. And so our equalized payment went from, it was $170 a month when we bought the house. We switched to the high-efficiency furnace. It dropped down to $90 a month, like a huge difference.
So you replaced them with 1 furnace, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
And, and that's worked fine. It's sometimes the basement is not quite as warm as the main floor, but, our monthly payments had gone down to $90 a month when we switched to the high-efficiency furnace, but that was, 15 years ago, 16 years ago. So every year or 2, it goes up by about $10. And I just got my new bill, and I'm now up to $150 a month for my equalized payments for my natural gas. So almost back to where I was with the old 2, inefficient furnaces. But in a way, it's kind of good news because I have, officially ordered an Arctic air source heat pump to replace my furnace. So I'm going to heat my home with electricity. It's a little bit risky in a super cold climate like ours, but, we've got one that's supposed to work in the extreme cold. And the goal is to get rid of my natural gas hookup completely. And so once I do that, I will now be saving $150 a month. And
Right.
so that'll be transferred onto my electricity bill because we'll be heating the house with electricity. So the question is, will it go up by $150 a month or more? I'm thinking maybe a little bit more than that. But the fact that the natural gas keeps going up like that, it's a good sign that maybe I made the right choice and that, eventually that kind of thing will pay off.
Brian, it is last week actually was our anniversary of the show.
Oh.
It's now 3 years old. February 12th
Wow.
is when we started.
That's amazing.
And you know what happened almost exactly one calendar month later? The pandemic.
What's that?
The pandemic started almost to the
We
day.
started a month before the pandemic. Yeah. We started the podcast before it was cool to start a podcast.
Everyone's got a podcast now. Thank you. Well, we were in your basement bomb shelter on your uncomfortable chair, which you made no apologies for. You said it'll keep me alert and I won't stay too long.
That's right.
I won't stay to chat afterwards. You'll
We
get
need
rid
a
of me.
short, quick, snappy show.
Do you remember what our first topic was?
No.
I do. It was,
was it that the Nissan had made a sound that made your electric car sound like a gas car?
it was a child's put your baby to sleep setting in EVs for Nissan.
Ah,
Yeah, probably a rumbly, vibrating combustion engine might be better. Yeah, more resembles the womb than EVs. So wombs are more combustion than,
yeah.
with all the gas going on in that. I was excited today to find, to actually use Adobe Podcast, which is it's a beta app that Adobe has come up with that they're letting people use for free. What it does is it uses AI to repair and restore poorly recorded audio. And so when I had a clip for the show today, later on in the show, from a YouTuber who has like 2 million subscribers, which means he's making a living off this, right? Like he's a sciencey information YouTuber, which are popular. Yeah. But he doesn't know audio, and it's understandable because audio is hard. And even for you and I who are trained, it's always a challenge, and you have to spend some money and know a few things about what you're doing. And it's a learning curve. Like it's harder than video, I would say, in a lot of respects.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Nowadays, you can point a camera and it'll record whatever you're pointing at, but audio is a bit trickier. You see that with a lot of popular YouTubers. I was watching a show last night. My son is home from university, and he's got me watching Jet Lag, which is a YouTube series from another information podcaster from Wendover Productions. But he's got his employees, because he's got employees now, because YouTubers have employees, Brian. He's got 2 employees in New York, and he lives in the mountains of Colorado, having a great old time and having them write and do everything for him now. He just does the voiceover. But now he's got this very spin-off series, and they play tag throughout Europe. They have to run and get on trains and go and do different things, and they circumnavigated the globe in another episode. And I know what you're thinking. What about the carbon emissions? Well, They calculate the carbon emissions on the show and tally it up, and then they offset it by 10x. So just to be safe, so you can't complain, they do it 10 times more, and then they use goldstandard.com or something like that.
Okay, well, maybe that's the answer for me then, because I've been wondering about carbon offsets. So, yeah, maybe the answer is to just overcompensate, and maybe that will be enough.
You've been doing it all your life, Brian. Why stop now? Anyway, here's what it sounds like. I'm going to play you just a second of the clip before enhancement.
Thanks to induction technology, the stovetop kettle can be even faster.
And this is it, enhanced.
Thanks to induction technology, the stovetop kettle can be even faster than an electric kettle.
So yeah, we're going to talk about electric kettles later. And I improved this 2 million subscriber guy's YouTube video for our podcast, which has standards, Brian. It has standards. And boy, I wish I had it for when we did Zoom interviews last summer with the Bloomberg people in New York talking about the Biden thing, because that opens up the door now, because they had crappy audio and I tried it on them and it worked really well.
Yeah,
it wasn't perfect, but it was really, really well, really good. So that's one of the bummers about doing Zoom interviews. They can't set up their own audio, even when
can't expect them to.
You should be able to in some cases when you're media people, but so that's cool. And from now on, people will have good audio.
Okay, so the European Union has now moved one step closer to banning combustion vehicles from 2035. Apparently, there's still one more step to this. The EU is a large and lumbering bureaucracy, so it's not quite yet a done deal. As I mentioned off the top of the show, same thing for New Jersey. New Jersey has done this as well. They've actually got, this is a story from Electrek, New Jersey requiring all electric car sales by 2035, and they've got many other initiatives going on. They want 100% clean electricity. They've bumped that up to 2035 as well. You know, lots of various initiatives in New Jersey. They're doing quite a lot.
And yeah, like all these places, they take forever. You hear the announcement, and then it's a long time before it's really official.
And there was a story this week. So, you know, the Tesla prices have come down in the U.S. And so now on the leasing prices, the Tesla Model 3 is now like a few bucks cheaper than a Toyota Camry, which is often the car that it's compared to price-wise. So we're getting to that price parity for electric vehicles versus gas vehicles, which is very interesting.
Yeah, and I should point out that those Camrys that they compare are usually not the base ones. They're usually, you're trying to compare apples to apples. So Teslas are really well-loaded cars. They have virtually everything you can imagine. I don't know if you're wanting for anything in your car, but if you are, they probably have it in the new cars. So yeah. I don't know why anyone who could afford a Camry would not buy a Tesla.
I think there would be the case of people who just don't know enough about it and would go and buy a Camry. But, you know, anybody listening to the show, I think, knows it'd be a terrible idea to buy a Camry instead of that Model 3.
But you know, the things that are moving really fast now are fleets, because you can't fool around when you're a fleet. You have a budget, you have an accountant, and it makes a huge difference. I mean, it makes a difference in my life and your life, but you have to figure that out. You have to get a napkin. And I advise anyone who's thinking about it to know what your local, I didn't know what my local electricity price was. I never paid attention to what price per kilowatt hour it was. I mean, I just knew what my bill was every month. That's the only thing I really paid attention to. But yeah, I mean, typically it's around 14 cents a kilowatt hour, and it can be a lot more in some places and even less in others. And sometimes there's, peak demand pricing where it's cheaper to do it overnight. So it becomes even a fraction of your normal price, and you can charge your car overnight. So if you write down how many miles, kilometers you ride every year, and if they're highway or city, and you can figure this out. And it's you can do the napkin calculations and fairly quickly realize that it's not just the cost of the car, it's the cost of ownership. I mean, we pay $120 for an oil change every 8-10 months. So I mean, that's gone. Yay. I hate oil changes. I won't miss those, Brian. My God. Oh, and speaking of such things, we have a letter here from, who's it from? It's from Bryce. Brian, I'm afraid Bryce is in Florida, and I made fun of Florida last week or the week before.
Uh-oh.
What I did is I made fun of Florida and laughed and said, we don't have any listeners in Florida. Typical. I'm never saying that again. I'm never making the assumption that we have no listeners somewhere. Says, hello, Brian and James. I want to start this email by saying that I am a fan of the show and the work that both of you have done. My name is Bryce Hauser. I'm a master's student at the University of Florida studying international business and environmental science. I'm looking to work in the business side of renewable energy upon my graduation in May, and I'm reaching out for your help. Renewable energy is no doubt the solution to climate change. However, I recently started to learn more about the cobalt mining in the Congo and the absurdly harmful and awful human and environmental impacts that are taking place there. Due to the bulk of cobalt mined going to renewable energy such as EVs, I've reached a crisis because I pursued this career to help the environment and people, but feel that I'm a part of this problem. I wanted to ask, what is your opinion on the cobalt mining in the Congo? And if you have any information on it or have talked about it in the podcast, please let me know. Thank you for your time. I'm inspired by you both. Thank you so much, Bryce. We appreciate the kind words and the letter. Brian, I've got a few things to say, but I'll let you start off and take a shot at this.
Well, I mean, it's a difficult topic. I'm certainly not an expert on cobalt in the Congo, except I think we've all heard about, negative things.
Very
as far
negative
as that.
things.
Yeah, and I think, this is I think often the first thing that comes up, not cobalt specifically, but when I tell people I've got a clean energy podcast or something, they almost always leap to the negatives about it where, like there's still a carbon footprint to electric vehicles. Like, none of this stuff is a perfect solution, but it's, 1,000 times better than digging up oil and burning it. Like, there's literally thousands of people dying from air pollution every single day. So it'd be difficult to add up the negatives about clean energy and have them somehow be worse.
Okay, so yeah, there are valid concerns about the extraction in the Democratic Republic of Congo in particular. They produce 60% of the world's supply of cobalt, I have here. And cobalt has been used in most lithium-ion batteries for decades and decades. And Forbes has pointed out that no one's throwing away their cell phones. But, to be fair, a lot more batteries obviously go into an EV. So, and there's all kinds of hideous things going on in the Congo and all kinds of things where they try to correct it and maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah. And cobalt is one of the smaller elements in these batteries. But, when you make so many of them, it's a problem.
Okay. So on the bright side, Bryce, according to Forbes, there's a solid financial reason why EV makers are reducing and eventually hope to eliminate cobalt from their batteries. It's hugely expensive, and one of the main contributors to the comparatively high purchase price of EVs. Now, Brian, Tesla has done this with LFP, like lithium phosphate batteries, right? They're not as energy dense, but they're safer, and they have no cobalt.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if they had no cobalt, but that's
less
great.
Nickel too, I think. Let me just read it here. It says I said lithium phosphate. It's iron phosphate batteries, LFP, which are quite common now. I think Tesla had half their batteries were LFP last year, so they've got a lot of cobalt out of their. That would include their energy, their grid scale stuff too. They don't use nickel or cobalt, are traditionally cheaper and safer, but they offer less energy density, which is a problem for EVs. But Bryce, it's not a problem for decarbonizing the grid, right, Brian? Because you don't care about energy density so much when you're putting a giant battery installation on a piece of land. It doesn't matter. You don't care about the weight. You don't care about the volume as much.
Yeah. And the LFP batteries are just cheaper too. So we can deploy more of them at a lower cost.
And safer. So the idea is that they're going into, less efficiency and shorter range means they're going into the shorter range vehicles, but not the more premium, longer range versions of vehicles will have the different batteries. But hopefully, that'll change soon. Lately, they have improved enough that it now makes sense to use cobalt-free batteries in lower-end and shorter-range electric vehicles, according to Electric, and also frees up the production of battery cells with other more energy-dense chemistries to produce longer-range vehicles. Tesla was early in recognizing this, and I remember Elon Musk talking about this fact, and he started adopting the chemistry for shorter range fairly quick, first in China, I believe.
Yeah, and then the other issue were patents, that there are patents to the LFP batteries which just recently expired, I think at the beginning of this year, end of last year or something like that. So that's another thing that's making the LFP batteries cheaper to produce, which is great.
And just as a follow-up here, the Democratic Republic of Congo does have 60% of the world's cobalt production, but they're not everyone, right? Russia, unfortunately, is second. They're not using children, I don't think, in their minds. Who knows? But they are using the money from that for nefarious reasons, I'm sure. Australia, though, is number 3, but it is a fraction of what the Congo does. And Philippines and Canada is actually, let's see here, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. But we're at 25th of the Congo. The thing is, though, everyone's aware of the Congo problem, and they're trying to exert pressure to fix it, or they're not going to, Congo's not going to sell any cobalt, and that's going to be that. At least to a lot of people, they're going to sell a lot less of it. They're expanding as much cobalt production as possible everywhere else. They're, the pedals to the metal, and they're doing it as fast as they can. Cuba also has some, in Papua New Guinea, but like I said, they're all fractions of what the Congo has. But altogether, there's 40%, and hopefully that keeps going up.
And if you have it for sale, and you're not the Congo, and you're not Russia, people will want to buy it.
Yes, and then they'll be the first people to sell it, and so there's a big incentive to invest. Investment is a big deal here, Brian.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think it's important just not to get despondent about it because, of course, the clean energy transition is not perfect. There's certainly downsides to it, but the biggest downside is digging up oil and burning it. Like, we obviously have to stop doing that.
And, you'll hear all kinds of negative things, but a lot of these things are whipped up by the fossil fuel industry. Now, it doesn't mean that, cobalt in Congo is ethical. It's not. But, the fossil fuel industry is constantly reminding people of a lot of things that aren't factual. And, it's not just coming from Congo. 60% of it was.
And they've got lots of people kind of spreading their information for them because, like I say, it's the first thing, not necessarily the Congo, but people always bring up the negative aspects when they start talking to me about clean energy.
It's more likely that it's going to be in your cell phone battery in a few years than in your EV, because the cell phone needs energy density. The EV is bigger, and they'll be able to charge faster and have smaller batteries than the extended range versions of the vehicles now. So, yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about it, although this is definitely a growing pain and it's very frustrating. But I would not be discouraged, because it's not the future, it's the present. And things are going to get better, and 50% of batteries right now are now cobalt free, and that's only going to get better. Everything's going to get better every day. So I applaud you for what you've done with your career and your caring about people. We are the same way, and we encourage you to have a successful run in your life, and let us know. Keep us up to date on the very interesting things that I'm sure you're going to do and encounter in your life.
Okay, so we've been talking regularly about the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States of America, and it's lots of money and subsidies for various aspects of the clean energy revolution, and EV chargers is a big one. There is billions of dollars going in the U.S. from government money to improve the charging network and put in more chargers. But another favorite topic of ours is how, often these chargers do not work. You often talk about the out-of-spec motoring channel on YouTube, and he started a new Twitter account called Rate Your Charge. And there's other people doing sort of similar things, but I have been following that on Twitter lately. And the idea is that you just, you're charging your electric vehicle somewhere, and you make a little post and you tag Rate Your Charge and tell us about the charging. And it is fairly discouraging. It's exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about. Somebody will be at a charger in Mississippi, and they'll say, okay, one charger is working, the other three are broken. Mm-hmm. Or I'm on this 350 kilowatt charger, but it's only giving me 50 kilowatts. It's a very, unfortunately, long list of problems. Tesla being the exception. They have excellent reliability, and the Tesla network works well. They will be opening that up eventually in the U.S. to non-Tesla vehicles. That's still in the works. That's going to take a while. But anyway, so they're going to add a requirement in the U.S. that you need a 97% uptime reliability on your chargers if you are getting this government subsidy. Now, it's not quite clear how they're going to police this or how they're going to figure out if people are sticking to that. But I think it's a start, and it's a very necessary one, because this is obviously a huge problem, and you don't want to be spending billions of dollars on chargers that don't work. Like, that's going to just seem like the biggest boondoggle of all time if this is what happens in all these thousands of chargers get deployed. I
tell you, if you have a charging network that works, say you're Tesla, and you do widely open it and it does work, your first choice is to navigate a trip on the highway to a Tesla charger. So these other guys, these other competitors who are making these crappy chargers and not fixing them, are screwed, including the oil companies who are trying to get into this.
And it seems to be because, Tesla's always seen the business case for this, but it always seems like everyone else has treated it like it's a charity case. It's like, oh yeah, sure, we'll do some electric chargers. So they're not really thinking long term that, eventually these are going to replace all the gas pumps. So they should, start thinking about it more from a business standpoint. In fact, I'm going to find another article here. Just give me a second. Oh, yeah, this is from Green Tech Lead. EV charging revenue to exceed $300 billion by 2027. So right now, they're expecting it to be $66 billion in 2023. And by 2027, up to $300 billion. So there's money to be made here, and especially with these generous subsidies.
You know what I'm waiting for is Tesla to put more solar with their chargers because they promised they would do that years ago.
Yeah.
In order, if nothing else, to bring the price down for them and for everyone else. So what's taking so long?
Solar and like also possibly with the mega chargers they're going to be deploying with semi trucks. Those are going to have an even faster charging rate. So it sounds like they're probably going to put like a Tesla mega pack of batteries with those charging stations. So the ideal is that every charging station has some solar and has some battery storage as a buffer to, fill up the batteries when the costs are low, when the sun is shining, and to be able to provide the highest amount of electricity, because some places on the grid aren't necessarily going to have enough juice to, be charging up, thousands and thousands of watts at a time.
So a month or two ago, we had a story about a appliance maker that was putting a battery into an induction cooktop stove. I don't know if you remember that. And the reason was, or was it just the induction cooktop? The reason was because people didn't have enough power generally to use these devices. So this charged up and gave you the surge for the time it needed, which is only a few minutes, and we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, no, a lot of people, they don't have enough space on their electrical panels. I doubled the space on mine, 100 amps to 200 amps. But yeah, things like that could really help where, you've got a plug-in that only can supply 15 amps. But if your unit has a battery in it, then you could maybe for short periods of time go up higher than that.
Yeah, that's one of the struggles as we get into higher rates is the connection to the grid becomes more expensive. If you have a bunch of people charging at, 350 kilowatts compared to the really first ones, the 50 kilowatt ones that the Bolt charges at in a few old EVs like the Nissan Leaf. So, yeah. That's one way to do it, and Tesla's set up to do that because they have the mega packs ready to go. They make them themselves. So if you charge those suckers up with solar, I would like to see them at least canopies as a token amount of electricity over the cars.
Yeah, and it's nice to have a covering too. Most gas stations have a covering over the pumps. It'd be great to have that for all EV
because you're sitting
chargers.
there in the hot sun or the rain or whatever, and yeah, it'd be nice, especially if you have one of my vending machines that you can go to that I envision for future EV charging stations with fresh sandwiches made by robots, Brian. See, I'm developing this. Robots are getting into food preparation. This is the perfect situation. It's an isolated highway charging station. What do you want in your sub sandwich, Mr. Whittingham? I'll make anything.
It's the sandwich artist of the future.
Good one. The Saskatchewan Electric Vehicle Association has posted sort of a survey that our utility did here where Brian and I live on EV drivers. So I thought I would touch on it because some of them were a little surprising. And they may be more surprising to you than to me because I've been talking to a lot of people about this. Overall, driver satisfaction with EVs averaged 9.3 out of 10. And I bet at least 0.4 of that negative rating is from somebody who doesn't own an EV but did the survey nonetheless because they're a hater. The top 3 motivations for purchasing or leasing an EV. Number 1, can you guess what it was, audience? It's saving money. Right? What do you think about that one, Brian?
Yeah, that is surprising. I mean, I didn't think I was going to save money with my EV because I knew I was getting in a bit early. I thought I might, after 10 years, kind of be comparable to a gas vehicle, but... Well,
when I bought my used Leaf for 10 grand, 5 years old,
different story.
I knew it would pay for itself in 5 years compared to... Well, I was using a gas guzzler SUV with premium gas, but it all made it very easy. So... saving money was essential to my purchase because I didn't have a lot of money for fooling around. But I would say my interest in the technology was number 1. That's probably what I wrote on the survey, saving money too. And, I want to save the environment, but I'm also not stupid. I know that, if I wanted to save the environment, this isn't the best way to do it. I would take a bus or a bike.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it is better than buying a gas. It's better for the environment. And there's all kinds of studies that are out there.
Yeah. So number 1 was saving money. Number 2, the environment. Number 3, interest in new technology.
And that might surprise some people. Here's what people are using them for. Business use was 3% and personal use was 97%. I expect that to change greatly over the next couple of years, not even that long.
No, and as we know, most business vehicles drive for longer periods of time, so it won't take long for that to flip.
That's starting to flip now. 5% lease and 95% own. Only 12% were used. I'd be one of those people. And yeah, the rest were new because it's hard where we live to buy a used vehicle.
Oh, yeah, very hard.
Not so hard in California, Colorado, Oregon, places like that. Some places in Europe, certainly Germany, or certainly Norway, I was going to say. Saskatchewan EV drivers' concerns: not enough battery range was 30%, not enough local charging stations, 34%, not enough highway charging stations, that's the one that they're concerned about, 85%. And for good reason. Performance during winter, 36%. So the majority of people, though, are not concerned about range. They're not concerned about having local charging stations, and they're not concerned about winter performance, which everyone hopefully knows goes down.
Yeah. It's just a matter of education and a whole different paradigm that you have to get used to.
So the average public charging station uses per year were 13. So 13 public charges, and out of province 8. So those are people who are going on trips. So, if you think of all the times that you charge your car, I charge mine every day. Some people don't have to. They charge, once a week or twice a week. All those charges, most of them are at home and not of concern. And once they iron out the highway charging, which Biden's trying to do here, as you mentioned earlier, hopefully it will work out. As far as I'm concerned, it's not as much. There's more of a concern of broken stations rather than having the stations, because there's almost enough stations to get by right now if they were working.
Yeah, and as these statistics point out, you don't really need as many charging stations as you need gas stations, probably because you do most of your charging at home, whereas you can't fill up your gasoline car.
And as I've predicted before in the show, I predict gas stations will go away in the cities. They'll be harder to find because everyone on the highway is where you're going to be charging your vehicle. And, condo owners and business owners and shopping malls and grocery stores, they're all going to come around soon enough, at least in the rest of this decade, if not in the next 2 to 3 years, depending on where you live. Yeah, so I'm pretty optimistic about that. Remember, we are kind of out in the boonies here. We're not, we're kind of the latest adopters of this technology, so that's where we're at.
Yeah, and the Tesla charging network opening up to non-Teslas, that is a huge thing. It's happened a little bit in Europe. It's happened a bit in Australia, coming soon to the USA. There's been no mention of us here in Canada. I'm thinking a couple of years from now, it'll be opened up. And so, I think in, say, about 2 years, the charging situation will be very, very healthy.
Our show being 3 years old, we've talked in the early days of our show about flying taxis, and now you have something to say about that.
Yeah, so the first electric air taxi takes flight around New York City. This is from Electrek. So this is a company called Blade Air Mobility and Beta Technologies in a partnership. They have now tested their first electric vertical takeoff and landing air taxi in the New York City area. So, this is the flying cars that we were promised, by the Jetsons.
Yeah.
Back when we were kids. It's finally happening. Basically, flying cars.
Where do I buy mine, Brian? And who do I buzz first?
Yeah. And, makes sense in a place like Manhattan. I'm assuming that they're going to use, like a really dense place like that. If you're a billionaire and you need to get somewhere quickly.
I want to be one of those guys, have my own building to take off from the roof.
You don't want to schlep around in a taxi.
Floor. No, I don't want to go down to the ground.
No. Like you can, take off from LaGuardia and land on the roof of your private building.
Sure, and I want McDonald's to have a skyscraper that I can stop on and go through the drive-thru up there, Make it nice and quick.
Air drive-thrus. I hadn't thought of that.
Invented here on the Clean Energy Show. Cha-ching.
So these are obviously kind of small. Doesn't say the exact number of passengers, but they're making one that's optimized for passengers, one that's made for cargo. 250 nautical miles range. Do you know what that is in normal miles?
Nautical miles. I've looked it up and it didn't stick. It's a bit different.
They're almost the same.
They're almost the same. Yeah.
It's 250 nautical miles, maybe a few more of that in regular
but
miles.
Speed in knots is very different.
And it takes 50 minutes to charge up So, yeah, I would love to take a ride in one of those.
I want to be the first person. I'd be the 10,000th or so, maybe 20 millionth. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, the big thing is I don't want them driving over my house. That's what Musk said before. And but they have some uses. I mean, if you're replacing helicopters in Manhattan, then giddy up. And,
And I imagine they'll be kind of noisy, but not as noisy as a
I've heard the
helicopter.
contrast. They aren't. You're right. They're noisy, but not nearly as noisy. We have air ambulances that fly over my house on a regular basis. Do you have that too?
No, I don't see them.
Really?
No.
Well, we have them all the time, and I don't know. I think it's because people are stupider up north, where they have to go get the people who drive into trees and get them out of their car wrecks more often. Because it seems like a frequent thing. Anyway, listen, the New York City Fire Commissioner, Laura Kavanaugh, has called upon the Consumer Product Safety Commission to take action and help prevent what it calls substandard lithium-ion batteries from entering the United States. Now, these are batteries from China that are going into cheap e-bikes, which are e-bikes are expensive, but you can get substantially cheaper ones from China, and the batteries are part of the reason. So Kavanaugh made the appeal to the Public Safety Office after NYC experienced hundreds of e-bike and e-scooter battery fires. Hundreds, Brian. This is not good. 6 of which resulted in fatalities last year. So in a statement, Kavanaugh advocated further measures to block the import of low-quality batteries and ban so-called universal battery chargers, which I've seen and thought about it. Now I'm not, because I thought, well, what happens if my charger breaks? You have to have really the right charger.
Really specific, yeah.
The right amps, the right wattage, the right volts. Everything has to be right, and you can't just leave it charging most of the time either. You have to unplug it, as you've learned.
We've talked about that. They often don't have great battery management on them. So, plug them in for an hour, set a timer, hour and a half, set a timer, make sure you unplug it.
Yeah, and it doesn't guarantee a fire, but I mean, if you left it on for days, maybe it could, or who knows. But you definitely want, there's so many things that I have now. Like I've got batteries for drills. I've got a battery for my snowblower. Yeah. I've got there seems to be all kinds of things around the house. The e-bike battery is the biggest one.
No, we talked about it when I went to Banff, and we recorded a podcast when I was in Banff, and it was like an insane array of devices that need charging that I had to take with me, including my car, because I drove there electrically.
Yeah. It's not good. I mean, there was a cargo plane that had to crash land. No, it landed quickly because there was a battery fire. So they consider that on planes hazardous materials if they're in the cargo hold. So New York City officials take the threat posed by low-quality e-bike batteries seriously, they said. In one incident, this is the worst-case scenario, the biggest fear. In 2022, even led to firefighters having to use ropes hanging from the 20th floor of a building to save people trapped by a blaze. So that's a nightmare. As this expands around the world and e-mobility becomes bigger and bigger, we do have to address this problem. So be careful with what you buy and how you use it.
Well, I have 2 e-bikes parked in a closet not far away from me, so let's hope they don't catch on fire. All right, so I just wanted to mention a podcast in case you were interested in the wood-burning stove issue. We've mentioned it a couple of times on the show, and The Guardian has been doing a lot of stories about this, The Guardian in the UK. I'm not going to play a clip or anything because we've sort of talked about this a bit, but in case anyone is interested, The Guardian has a podcast called Today in Focus, and one of the most recent episodes is about a half hour long, and they discuss this issue of wood-burning stoves and the particulate pollution that they cause, how it is definitely a pollution issue that we should not forget about. So it's the Today in Focus podcast from The Guardian, if you're interested in that issue.
One of my favorite podcasts has always been the Under the Influence, the CBC radio advertising and show, which you can get anywhere in the world in podcasts. And they were replaying an old episode yesterday where they had the person who runs the show is in advertising, and he sent out letters to all of his buddies from his career for strange stories. And the top one was a major son of a brewing empire in the United States came to Canada to make a commercial. They watched the commercial, and the commercial involved somebody, the father cutting like a Thanksgiving turkey and serving it. And the guy says, well, wouldn't the butler serve that to people? I don't understand. And he just could not understand why the father was serving food because he lived in such a bubble of richness. Well, who feeds the butlers? I don't understand how you would feel so stupid. I just had to bring that up. But anyway, it's time for the tweet of the week. This comes from Simon Evans at Carbon Brief. His handle is DRSIM Evans. And he says the solar outlooks Viz Realities tweeted a chart. We're always talking about how the outlooks for everything you and I talk about are always not what they are. They're always underestimated.
Yeah, the forecasts put out by the sort of major agencies like the international energy agencies, they're always underestimating how much clean energy is going to get deployed.
So every year they raise it up the starting point, but it's basically a flat line or it goes up slightly.
Yeah,
and in reality,
they're not drawing it like an S curve like they should.
But this Brian, is getting beyond an S curve, this solar adoption worldwide. It's going almost straight up.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So that is S curving the hell out of S's. That's just nuts. It's just taking off like freaking crazy. And still, all their estimates are, well, it'll probably be flat. So yeah, this is the International Energy Agency that has predicted these flat outlooks, and they have done this for years and years. Even years before we started this podcast, I was looking at this stuff saying, you idiots. So they're always conservative, but it's not the reality of it.
Yeah. No, the amount of solar being deployed is insane right now.
And Simon points out that these forecasts are based on 25-year life cycles of solar panel farms. And generally speaking, he's saying they're going to last longer than that. I would keep the panels on my roof for 40 years if I didn't want to replace them. I mean, there's advantages to replacing them because they'll be cheaper in 40 years. They'll be probably put out twice the power they do now in 40 years. So
yeah, it's a bit like LED light bulbs. Like at a certain point in their lifespan, they don't put out quite as much light. And they still work, and solar panels are kind of the same way. The efficiency eventually drops, and they don't put out what they did when they were new.
But the point is, nobody's going to trash everything in 25 years. These things could go on. You could just build another solar farm next door until that one does need replacing. And then,
easier to do that than to trash
and then,
them.
That makes this even crazier. And it's crazy as it is. So anyway, Brian, I want to dip into the mailbag once again. This is another letter we have this week. I heard your comment on this week's podcast about getting a portable induction stovetop and thought you might be able to use this very technical analysis of the energy needed to boil a liter of water from an electric kettle. The episode also talks about induction stoves at one point. Have a very efficient day from Jeff Fahrenholtz in Columbus, Ohio. Thank you, Jeff. Greatly appreciate you sending us a note. This is a YouTuber, Brian, that I've seen before, and you've seen this video, right?
Yeah, no, it's boiling water is one of my favorite topics because I'm a very boring person.
Fortunately, you're not looking for a mate because that would not be a good calling card.
Yes, but I want to remind my listeners of and he actually mentions this in the YouTube video that he knows people in the USA who have put in 240 volt outlets in their kitchen because they want to boil water.
That person would be crazy to do that because they wanted to boil water fast, wouldn't they?
Yes. And that is exactly what I did. I ordered a kettle from the UK. The UK kettles, the UK electrical system, all their kettles are like 3,000 watts and they run on, 220 or 240 volts. So I ordered a kettle from the UK. I
had an electrician install it.
Had an electrician install a 240 volt plug in the kitchen and then had them change the plug because you need a North American 220 volt plug rather than the UK one. And so I have that. So this is one of my favorite topics. So thank you, Jeff, for bringing it up so I could talk about my amazing 240 volt kettle in my kitchen that boils
any chance
water.
He gets, people ask him about his damn kettle.
Super. It's like literally like we upgraded our whole kitchen and it's literally the best thing about it.
Okay, Brian. You went to the UK. You saw how fast their water boiled. You were envious. You took action.
Yeah. At first, I was confused. We rented this
water
condo
different
in the
here?
UK, and it was boiling so quickly. I was like, well, what's going on here? And then, just flipped it over and it said 3,000 watts, which is unheard of around
Well,
here.
it makes it good for car charging too. You don't have to do weird things that we have to in North America.
It's true. Yeah. Their sort of base power load for the UK is way better than ours.
So this YouTuber did a 1 liter of water boiling test with different things. Because right now there's a big discussion about how gas stoves are the fast way to cook. Well, gas was the slowest, okay? Gas took 8 minutes.
No, there's basically propaganda being spread by the gas industry to make you think that gas is somehow the best thing to cook with, and it is totally not.
Whenever there's propaganda spread, Brian, I find that the opposite is often true. You know, they don't fool around. They go not just a little ways with the line. They try to flip everything around. Well, the gas flame actually took the longest. Now, this is with a gas stove top with a kettle that you sit right on the stove top. Now, one thing I also learned is that people in the United States don't drink tea.
No, and they don't often even have electric kettles. Like an electric kettle is a very common thing in Canada, absolutely ubiquitous in the UK. But no, electric kettles are not much of a thing, even now in the USA.
So we do boil water, though. I mean, I boil it for pasta. I boil it for other food items, and some family members may make some sort of porridge. You know, we boil corn on the cob. There's different things you boil for water for.
Yeah, and if we are making pasta and we still have a gas cooktop, which I'm trying to get rid of, but we boil the water in the kettle and then pour it into the pot on the stove because
kettle.
It's way faster.
Yeah, and that's what he says, that it's faster to do. So what he did is he went out and bought an electric kettle on Walmart, and it's the cheapest one you could buy. It was like $14, and it had a little heating element, not on the bottom, not a plate on the bottom like most of ours do in our house.
Yeah,
but an actual sort of loop of a thing that gets red hot in the middle of the water, and that's the most efficient.
Yeah. So even though it's only a 1,500 watt kettle, because the heating element is immersed in the water, it ends up boiling faster than the gas and even faster than like just a regular electric stove.
So currently in our house, we have a glass cooktop. So it's a smooth cooktop and little circles get red underneath, right? That's kind of the easy cleanup version of where we progressed after the coil ones. And that took 6 minutes. So the first one, the gas was 8. So even mine is 2 minutes faster or 25% faster than the gas flame. And the kettle that you plugged in was actually the most efficient, pretty much. Even at 110, it was 4 minutes and 33 seconds, practically twice as fast as gas, So that was significantly faster. But then, to my interest, he also looked into portable and regular induction cooktops, because that's what I was talking about last week.
Thanks to induction technology, the stovetop kettle can be even faster than an electric kettle. In fact, potentially faster than a European one. Induction stoves are the new hotness, and they work by sending high-frequency alternating current through a coil of wire beneath the cooking surface. When a suitable cooking vessel is placed above it, electric currents are induced within the vessel's metal base. Those currents will actually heat the bottom of the pot, or what have you, just like the current flowing through a heating element. In effect, it turns the pot itself into the heating element. At full power, this brought a liter of water to boil in 4 minutes and 29 seconds. That's the fastest result we've seen. Hardwired induction cooktops you'll find either on their own or attached to an oven often feature a burner that can pump out close to 4 kilowatts, sometimes more. With one of those, you could boil a liter of water in 90 seconds flat.
Wow. I would like to, if you get that induction cooktop, and I know you will, I want to do a test between your British kettle and the induction with 1 liter of water.
Yeah, so I have ordered an induction cooktop to replace the gas one. It's a full-sized unit, be built in, so I'll have to get an electrician to install it. And I think it actually will be faster because I think it'll be faster, but we'll have to see.
Oh, we have to do the science, Brian. Science excites me. And we'll have the exclusive right here on the show. So that's so cool. I'm still thinking about getting an induction portable just for boiling water, and because they're so cheap,
No, and even if you're just getting a normal like that, $15 electric kettle, to all of our American listeners who are missing out on the beauty of an electric kettle, Think about it. They're great.
Well, you could make hot chocolate with it. I am instant coffee.
I make pour over coffee with it. So, you just grind coffee, you put it in a cone, you just you boil the water in the kettle, pour it over the grounds. It's a great way to make coffee.
Used to be a French press man. What happened?
I still have one, use it very occasionally, but I like the pour over.
Okay. I have one for camping off the grid. Worked really well the one time I used it, but I prefer the grid, Brian. The grid's so nice.
And shout out to the French Press Cafe where I go for coffee in the neighborhood sometimes.
Free coffee for Brian. Yeah. Well, I look forward to our next letter. Thank you for writing us, Jeff in Ohio. It's really interesting to hear what people are thinking about and what they bring to the show. And I know you guys probably have lots of questions. Don't be afraid to contact us here at the show. We'd love to hear anything. There's no such thing as stupid questions. Because other people have the same questions. So contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, or your views or concerns on anything that you might have. It is now time, Brian, for the prestigious lightning round. Yeah, it's a short one this week. It's a holiday here where we live yesterday, so I've had less time than normal, but here we go. Overlooked story in addition. EVs. This is the story about India. Okay, I want to be specific about this because I didn't have the numbers in front of me at the time. I do now. EV sales penetration by 2030 of 30% private vehicles. 70%, though, of commercial vehicles in India will have to be EVs by 2030, which is, that's kind of, in a way, matching or better than some of our North American and European targets. 40% of buses will have to be electric by then, and 80% 2- and 3-wheelers by 2030. And I think by 2030 that it's going to be better than that for buses and things because things will be cheaper. And 2-wheelers, everyone will be envious of anyone who has a 2-wheeler that doesn't need a tune-up or a spark plug or a carburetor cleaning and stinks and loud and it's quiet and doesn't have the same torque. The U.S. will allocate $7 billion to residential solar projects in disadvantaged communities. That is not a small number, Brian. That is a big fat number. Another $20 billion will be invested in new clean energy nationwide. So this is another announcement from the White House. And yeah, I think this is a great idea to help. It's been talked about. There's been some pilot projects here and there. But, why not give cheap electricity to the people who need it most and help the environment and invest in jobs while you're doing it? BP to invest $1 billion in EV charging across the United States by 2030. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I imagine they're going to get some of those sweet subsidies that are being handed out. So I guess it's better they do that than make another offshore oil rig.
They're going to have to work, though. 90% uptime. It's time for a CES Fast Fact. Rideshare rides consume 67% more energy than the rides that they replace. So you might think ride sharing, good idea. Generally speaking, though, not the case until electrification happens.
So this is prior to electrification.
Prior to electrification, and generally the fleet as a whole right now. So, yeah, it's going to have to change because those cars are driving around and not doing anything. So, for part of that time. So you have to factor that into the rides they do. By the way, the out-of-spec review guy took a ride in a Waymo. I found it kind of interesting because, he's a surrogate for you and I or anyone else who might be doing it. And he made a whole half-hour video of it. And you get in and you just call it on your app and the thing shows up by itself. He was in Phoenix. And the thing, you're waiting for this vehicle to show up for you, this robot. It's kind of odd. And it shows up at I don't know where they were, a Walmart parking lot or something. And they were going to go to Target a half hour away. And it shows up and they get in and it says CK for Kyle Connor or whatever his name is on the front. And, you know who it is. It's in big LED letters. And he gets in and it starts driving and starts talking to you and giving you information like a human voice. And the wheel, there's plastic to prevent you from touching the steering wheel. It says don't touch the steering wheel. It drives itself under any circumstance. There's a stop button. If you're not happy, press the stop button or press the pullover button or another panic button where you can contact. So, I mean, he said they're kind of notorious for phantom braking, and he said there was some of that. But generally speaking, and it scared the life out of him when it made a left turn. Like it just, but it drove like a normal person, but you don't know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So I imagine it's going to be very tense for a lot of people their first rides, but it works. I mean, they're doing it, and it's pre-mapped, and they've got LiDAR galore on the roof. Things, looks like a warship with all the things spinning around on top. But yeah, no, I mean, they work, and they're the future. They're coming. So a lot of people say no, they're not coming, but they are. Nissan Leaf EVs will power evacuation centers in Japan when disaster strikes. So in Japan, the Nissan Leaf, which I have, even the old ones, can go two ways, Brian. They can power your home in a power outage. Well, they're getting them together to all go to sort of disaster shelters to power those shelters. And they're setting up the infrastructure to connect to the EVs to do that in advance, which is, Florida, hello. I know we have at least one listener in Florida. That's an interesting idea.
And I think this even happened a little bit, when they've had earthquakes and tsunamis in Japan. I think this has happened a little bit already. And so now they're kind of formalizing the process.
Yeah, you need to have the infrastructure in place to do it. I mean, you need to set up the two-way inverter and everything that has to go in the house, which is not cheap and not readily available at the hardware store. So that's cool and a damn good idea. And you know what? I don't know where you're listening in the world, but wherever you are, think about that, because that's a very good idea. We should be doing that everywhere, including where you and I live. Not that we have any disasters here, thank God, but
yeah.
I mean, it could happen one day, but there's a lot of other places that are more prone, like Florida and coastal cities, and even Eastern Canada that gets hit with blizzards and whatnot. Musk is okay with Tesla going bankrupt if a rival built a better EV, but you're not okay, Brian, because your future relies on the Tesla stock. So what do you to say?
Well, yes, I am a Tesla shareholder, so I hope they don't go bankrupt, but I guess what I would do is sell my Tesla shares and buy whatever other company that is that's making the better EV.
Who would you bet on right now if you had to place a bet?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Excluding the Chinese companies, which aren't as well known to us.
Yeah, no, the Chinese companies definitely. I think Rivian is probably my favorite of the other companies, but it remains to be seen how healthy they're going to be financially.
Yeah. I'm impressed with what GM's doing, but we'll see how it comes along. I'm kind of quietly impressed with Ford because they're getting their products onto the street more so than GM right now. So I think the next year or two will tell us a lot. By the way, the Ford F-150 Lightning has a stop build order and stop ship order because a truck caught on fire due to a battery issue in the factory after it was inspected and sitting there, or pre-inspection or something like that. So that's not good. That is our show for this week, Brian. That's our time. We're done. Once again, big show, huge show, and 3 years. 3 years, my friend. 3 years we've been doing this, and you people out there have been listening to us. So thank you for listening. Thank you for your continued support. As again, I said before, contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And thanks to all of our donors who have contributed here and there over the weeks. And if you're new to the show, we'd like you to subscribe to the podcast app because we put out a new show every darn week and you can get them delivered to you. We'll see you next time.
See you next week.